Lag BaOmer is actually two things. So we're in the time period of the Omer, which is actually a mourning period, a sad period, where we mourn the death of 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva. And we're told that on Lag BaOmer they stop dying.
You are listening to the JP Show,
where we discuss the issues you care about from a Jewish perspective.
I am Rabbi G.
And I am Rabbi Levi.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome everyone to another episode of the JP Show. So Rabbi Levi, how are you doing today?
Thank God, we're busy. We're gearing up to Shavuot, which is coming up soon.
Yeah, I've seen your flyer that you put together.
It's going to be a good program.
I'm not going to say it now, but there's some really, really good topics coming up.
That's right.
Lag BaOmer is this week.
Lag BaOmer is this Sunday. Yeah. Something
happening. There's also what we call Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach.
Now, don't freak out. You don't have to clean your house for this one. This is a Pesach where you get to have matzah and chametz together, so it's all good.
But it is this Wednesday.
Yeah.
Let's just give a quick background. It's not our topic, but let's give a quick background on it, and that is in temple times when someone wasn't able to bring the Paschal lamb on Erev Pesach and eat it by the Seder because they were not near Jerusalem or they were impure. So God gave a second chance to do it a month later. And there's a tremendous lesson behind it, and that is that we should never despair. There's always a second chance. Even if you think you have been distant till now, there's always a second chance. But I do want to mention that there's an interesting custom, like Rabbi Levi just said. So it's this coming Wednesday, am I correct?
Yeah.
There's a custom to eat some matzah during the day. I know that everyone's desperate for another piece of matzah.
That's right. Especially the one that's from Pesach.
Exactly. But a little piece, just a custom. It's not an absolute obligation. If it hurts your stomach, don't worry about it. But it's a nice thing, and just to reflect on
the message. It's never too late.
The message is never too late. But that wasn't really our topic today. So what is?
So I want to focus actually on the next festival after that, which is Lag BaOmer, which is a very, very special day. I think people maybe perhaps miss it or perhaps don't know what it is. So Lag BaOmer is actually two things. So we're in the time period of the Omer, which is actually a mourning period, a sad period, where we mourn the death of 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva. And we're told that on Lag BaOmer they stop dying. So there's that sort of relief of that mourning. Many of the mourning practices are lifted on that day. We listen to music. People get married on Lag BaOmer. Some people take haircuts on Lag BaOmer.
But that kind of explains the lessening of the mourning. It doesn't
Correct.
Actually explain the great
But then
joy.
It's actually a very joyous day. And the reason for that is because it's the Yartzeit, it's the anniversary of the passing of the great sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was actually a student of Rabbi Akiva. He was one of the 5 students who remained, and he rebuilt Rabbi Akiva's legacy of learning and all of that. A very, very great sage, and he passed away on Lag BaOmer, and he asked that his day of passing should be a day of celebration. And until today, hundreds of thousands of people go to Miron, although unfortunately it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. But they go
where he's buried,
and they celebrate his legacy and what he stood for and his soul, which it's a very, very mystical, Kabbalistic day actually.
But it doesn't have to be at Miron. We can celebrate with
100%.
him any place.
Yeah, correct. And there's many customs. Some people like bonfires, and because it says that was the day that he passed away, there was a heavenly fire surrounding his bed. Some people play with bow and arrows on Lag BaOmer. I know you had a custom. You've taught us that you colored eggs. What's the reason for that custom? You want to
first of all, what does mean colored eggs? I saved the onion peels from Pesach actually, and then you put the onion peels in a pot and you boil the eggs, hard-boiled eggs, in the onion peels, and it turns completely red.
Yeah.
There's a few different reasons for it. One is just colored, so it's the idea of joy, like different colors, celebration. But there's also another reason that we do celebrate on Lag BaOmer, but we also, we always acknowledge the pain even when we celebrate, like at a wedding, right?
Right.
We break a glass. So although we celebrate amazingly on Lag BaOmer because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked us to, and we joined in, so to speak, with his joy. But we still acknowledge the 24,000 people that died. And we know that in Jewish tradition, an egg and hard-boiled egg is a symbol of mourning. So we acknowledge it with that egg, but we color it up, so still to show that it's a day of joy.
So the truth is, when thinking about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer, the main theme really is his uniqueness in his Kabbalistic teaching. So of course the holy book, the Zohar, which is the basis of all Kabbalah, of all Jewish mysticism, comes from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And from then onwards, Jews have learned the deeper mystical parts of the Torah. So, besides for his greatness, Rabbi Shimon's greatness in the halachic areas of the Talmud, of Jewish law, but he was extremely great in the Kabbalistic teachings and gave over that legacy, which then, many generations later, was taught by the Arizal, and then really very much expounded on and explained in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and of the teachings of Hasidus, which is learned until today, again, the deeper mystical parts of Torah. So I want to discuss something based on that. But before we do that, maybe you can just give a little bit of because you're someone who's very steeped in the works of Hasidus, of the deeper, sort of the mystical part of Torah, spent many years studying it. Maybe just give a little bit of an overview. What exactly is it? What exactly is that teachings that you spend so much time learning?
Okay, it's hard to define in like 60 seconds, but so we know that there's two parts to the Torah. We are taught that, well, the Torah has many parts, but if you want to just divide it into two, there's the revealed part of Torah, which is like the laws that we have to keep, the Talmudic analysis, the things which are discussed and have always been discussed in all the places of learning and academies of learning and so on and so forth. And then God also gave us the Pnimiyut Torah, the inner secrets, the mystical part of Torah, which really until Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai were completely secretive. They were exclusive for very, very few individuals. And there are very deep and mystical ideas that become the inner workings of Torah. So for example, let's say you learn in the revealed part of Torah, you'll learn about a mitzvah that you have to do, and you learn the halachot. In the mysticism, you'll learn about the mystical accomplishments and the hidden meanings behind the observance of the mitzvah. Or for example, about the soul, the whole idea of the soul, or just about God and God's working and how He created the world, and sort of things that are really very deep and sometimes very hard to understand, which originally they were taught in Kabbalah. So Kabbalah, actually the word Kabbalah, authentic Kabbalah that is, I'm not talking about
We'll get into that soon. What's the difference? Yeah.
Okay. So the word Kabbalah means to receive. It's handed down from person to person. Now I'm not talking about the deep Kabbalistic experiences and rituals of like performing miracles and using God's formations of God's name. I'm talking about the knowledge of Kabbalah, are factual things which are handed down from person to person. Until Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they were called the secrets of Torah for a reason, because they were supposed to remain secret. Not everyone was able to really to access them. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai changed that a little bit he started the process of changing it by authoring the Zohar and spreading it a bit more further than it was. The Arizal took it to a new level, and then came the Baal Shem Tov, and the teaching was the Hasidic philosophy that followed, and really made it accessible. It did a few things. First of all, it made it accessible to the masses. But one of the things that it did, particularly in the teachings of the Tanya by the Rabbi Shnei Zalman Lavladi, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, is they made it accessible to the human mind, really. So that things that were just taught and handed down from generation to generation, that just needed to be accepted, but would sort of transcended human logic or human rationale, without diluting it, took it and really brought it into the human intellectual experience. They were actually able to study these things and to actually have the terminology and the language and the ideas to be able to understand them properly. And it just gives, like the Baal Shem Tov, for example, placed a lot of emphasis on revealing to everyone the power of the soul, the hidden soul, the power of the hidden faith that lies within every single Jew, the power behind every mitzvah, and that just sort of brought up. It inspired people and it injected into them like a whole new depth and meaning of serving God.
Wow.
That
was
good. Okay, synopsis?
That was great. So you mentioned before, authentic Kabbalah, right? So obviously you implied there's something called inauthentic Kabbalah. There's a lot of Kabbalah flying around, these Kabbalah centers and so, first of all, what is that? And what actually differentiates, what makes something authentic Kabbalah? How do you know it's authentic, number one? And then more of a general question, which I think can lead to many other things, is, many people seek spirituality. There's people, go to India and then do, meditation practices, and then, they sort of seek this sort of like spiritual experience. People go to these retreats where like they don't talk for 2 weeks and just meditate and which personally I would find extremely difficult not to talk for 2 weeks, but people do it, which is in a way quite impressive actually. So the question is that the same thing? Like, are they looking for the same thing that you're looking for in the teachings of Hasidus, of teachings of Kabbalah? Was Reb Shimon Bar Yochai just another spiritual guru that led like a spiritual movement? What exactly is the difference?
Okay, so there's two. That's a great question. Those two questions are actually connected. So, I think I've often been asked the question. I think maybe this is the way to answer it. Can you be spiritual without believing in God? And people ask me this as a rabbi and obviously expect me to say, no, of course not. You have to believe in God, right? And actually, I surprise them by saying, yes, of course you can be spiritual without believing in God. The problem is you need to define spirituality, right? What does that mean? You can be spiritual, you just can't be Jewish. Meaning, spirituality, you see, Judaism is, funnily enough, not about spirituality.
Right.
Judaism contains spirituality and spiritual experiences, and they play a very important role. But at the essence, Judaism is not about being spiritual. Judaism is about being godly. And there's a very big difference. Spirituality means something that is a bit metaphysical. So we know that the physical world has frame of reference. It's got time. It's got space. Spirituality means to go a bit deeper than that and to go into the deeper consciousness of the human being, or whatever the case is, and maybe to connect to something a little bit higher than what I can feel and touch, right? Now, can you do that in other disciplines? Of course. You can go to a retreat and you can meditate very deeply. Sometimes it could be actually dangerous, but nevertheless, you can go deeper within yourself, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of healings. Even today, there's different types of healing processes where you go into your subconscious, into your metaconscious, into sort of things which bring up things that are, you reset the brain, all kinds of different disciplines and healing and kinds of experiences which you feel less physical and less material, which can be nice, but it's got nothing to do with God. And that's the problem with some of the pop Kabbalah as well. I mean, there's Kabbalah that's floating around today that actually doesn't encourage the observance of mitzvot, right? Now that's, in Jewish terms, that's a contradiction in terms, that's an impossibility. Kabbalah is at the inner part of Torah. It must center around God, first of all. And any Kabbalah that doesn't, any teachings of Kabbalah, by the way, within Jewish Kabbalah, there are different schools of thought, all based on the Zohar, but there are different schools of thought. Yep. We primarily follow the Arizal, he's the main school of thought in Kabbalah. But any Kabbalah that is not about God at the end of the day and doesn't encourage and doesn't induce greater excitement and commitment to learn Torah and keep mitzvot is just not proper Kabbalah.
Right, because it's a part of Torah. It has to be a part, which means that it must lead to other parts of Torah as well.
Exactly.
It must fuse.
And also the word Torah means instruction, and it's this is part of Torah, right? It means instruction. Now, it leads to being godly. What does being godly actually mean, as opposed to being spiritual? I think this is the crux of it. Being godly actually means to bring God into your physical life, right? That's what the purpose of Judaism is. Very different to other disciplines. Detachment, abstinence, all these things is a part of the experience to get you to be more godly, but the ultimate goal, right? For example, we know in the Torah, the two things that are called holy is eating and sexuality. Right. If you do it correctly. In other words, that's where if you can bring God into your food, you can bring God into your sexual life. That is the ultimate of holiness, actually, right? Yeah. It requires discipline. It requires abstinence in certain areas. It requires holding back. It requires a whole host of things. And therefore, fasting, Kabbalistic experiences, meditation, all these things in Judaism play a role. Number one, they've got to be godly based. They've got to be about God, about Torah. And number two, it's actually not an end in itself, which is one of the differences between, other disciplines of meditation and Jewish meditation. Jewish meditation is it's a means to an end. It's about being more susceptible to. It's like taking a break from the physical and the material in order to be more susceptible to godliness, and then ultimately to come back to be present within the physical and material world, and to bring God into that world.
So what is the you learning on a personal level? What has Hasidus done for you? The sort of the teaching of. How has it enhanced your Judaism?
Okay, that's a very personal question. Well, I won't tell you what it's done. I'll tell you what it should have done.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to make it do.
That's a very humble answer.
Still working on it.
That's right.
It gives a whole different depth on God and on God's relationship with the world and the greatness of God, the idea of Torah mitzvot, and really leads you to becoming a more God-centered person.
Yeah.
Very, very simply, right? It's about God is the only... You get to the realization that God is the true and only real and true existence, which is a long discussion what that means, but that's the idea. In other words, it gives really, you know what it does? It gives a very deep meaning into what we all know to be the sentence of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the oneness of God, and how everything really must be connected to God and can be connected to God. It gives an amazing sense and depth of purpose and direction and meaning, which, by the way, has a lot of benefits in terms of happiness, in terms of faith in God.
One of the emphases of Hasidus is joy, is happiness.
Absolutely.
Trusting
because part of that joy is about having the opportunity to connect to something far beyond yourself, far greater than yourself, which is amazing, right? I mean, also emunah, like bitachon, the calmness that it brings. I mean, obviously, we all struggle, and it's not as simple as just learning a couple of pages of Hasidic teachings or mystical teachings, right? I was talking to someone about the war, right? About the war in Israel recently. I mean, a few discussions like this. I talked about that despair is a really problematic thing, and the only way we can not despair is really to ignite and to activate the ingrained faith that we all have, right? Someone said to me, yeah, but this is you've got to be, this is the greatness of being focused on religion or whatever. Yes, it is. When you learn, especially learn the mystical teachings and how God really, everything is by divine providence, everything is run by God and so on, the calmness that it should and could bring and does bring, and the faith and the strength and the happiness is phenomenal.
So if someone would come to you and say, I want to start learning Jewish mysticism, where would you send them? Someone listening says, I want to get involved in this. What do you do?
I'll send them to BINA.
That's a good place. It's a good place to start. We do have 2 shiurim in Tanya, actually, one for women, one for men.
Yeah. And we have also different meditation,
Correct.
WhatsApps that are based on Hasidic teachings,
sure.
really Kabbalistic teachings. But I would take certain parts of Hasidic teachings, which is really nowadays the best way to really delve into these secret mystical teachings.
Yeah.
I wouldn't send them to the Zohar. First of all, the English translation is worse than the Hebrew. It's difficult to understand.
That's right.
Well, it's actually not Hebrew. It's Aramaic, actually, the Zohar. But yeah. I mean, there are different types of Hasidic teachings. It could be Chabad Hasidus. There are other forms of Hasidic teachings that also mention these concepts. And, these are the types of things that you get introduced for.
All right. So if anyone wants to, it's coming up Lag BaOmer. It's a good day to start, to get involved. I mean, obviously, all of Torah learning is important. We have to learn all of it. But this is a good time to...
Can I just mention one more thing before we finish? Just a very important thing about sometimes people misunderstand the teachings of Hasidic teachings. Because we said it's about God and godliness, right?
Right.
What some people often try and do is, and I've seen this written and lectures that people give and so on, is kind of use Hasidic teachings today as kind of a mental health exercise.
Right.
A self-help book. Now, it does have tremendous self-help benefits. There's no question. Self-discipline, positive thinking, all that. But it is wrong to think that
at its core, that's what it is.
At its core, that's what it is. In fact, it's not. You see, that's what I'm saying. It's not pop Kabbalah, and it's also not self-help. Self-help is about self-help. That's what it is. It's about self. It's about being a healthy human being. It's not wrong. It's not a bad thing. If someone... Now, first of all, if someone is clinically, has a mental health, a real mental health issue, then obviously needs to be... The proper intervention has to always happen. But even just from a purely sort of, self-help, being less anxious, being less... all that kind of stuff. That's about having a healthy self. Healthy self is important, and
it's needed. It's a prerequisite to any growth. Yeah.
Now, some teachings of Hasidus certainly contribute to that. I would recommend that. It certainly does. But at its core, that's not what it is. In fact, it's written for people who are kind of healthy and just have the regular human challenges. And
really, it's about transcending the self.
Transcending the self, exactly. That's the difference. It's really about transcending oneself. And a good time to be involved in this is, like you said, it's now, before Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the...
it's the energy of the day. Right.
It all started then. It all started the process of making the secret teachings of Torah accessible. That's where it started.
All right. So reach out to us if you want to get involved. We'll help you out.
And also join the celebration. I believe there's a parade coming up this Sunday.
There's a lot of things happening around town.
So
celebrating the joy of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai.
All the best, everyone.